This video touches upon one of the most important aspects of enhancing the satisfaction of our sexual and erotic life. Many teenagers and immature adults think that it's all about improving techniques, trying out new positions, acting out on fantasies, trying to have multiple orgasms, and so on. However, all of these attempts hardly have any real positive impact on the longer run. No, the real key is communication. I'm not talking about talking or making sounds during sex, and as a matter of fact, this can be highly disturbing and kill the arousal of your partner. I'm talking about communication about sex. The intimacy of sex is not really about penetration or anything like that, but about the honesty and the openness which intimacy requires. As a matter of fact, I believe that sexual communication is equally, if not even more important than the sexual act itself. So, when people are not satisfied with sex, they are most often complaining about the lack of compatibility with their partner. But most often the problem is not about the sexual act itself, but more about the interaction with the partner. So let's go back to the beginning of this course, to the motivations of sex. I explained that the problem of sexual compatibility is most often not a physiological thing, but just the inability to see how the cognitive mistake of our eneatype distorts the sexual function, and how we may not be able to understand the meaning that our partner finds in sex. And the only way to understand each other, the only way to see these differences, to find common ground, is by communicating. But also here, our type, instinct, and level of development have a huge impact on how we communicate. And as we will see, each type comes with their own type of communication problems. 1 is judgmental, 2 gets upset, 6 is anxious and afraid to lose, and so on. So it's not about certain types communicating more or less, but rather about having a healthy communication. And as a matter of fact, most often an unhealthy form of communication is counterproductive and automatically leads to resentment and feeling offended, a reduction of libido, and even more dissatisfaction. Many people, unfortunately, only start talking about sex when they have deep problems, but very often the resentment went too far already. Hence, it's of major importance to talk about this aspect of a relationship early on already. But unfortunately, in the limerence stage or in the real romantic phase of a relationship, many people believe that they don't need to communicate. They feel each other and they believe that their partner knows what they like. Well, that's just a very immature and romantic illusion. The reality is far more difficult, and it often takes 5 to 10 years for many couples to really communicate openly about sex. An unwillingness to talk is all too often an indicator for sexual repressive values, because people don't want to talk about things they repress. Of course, in the lower levels of development, communicating can be very difficult. In these levels, people have a very strong sense of entitlement and a lack of emotional intelligence and empathy to understand the perspective of the partner. And very often in the lower levels, people are not aware of the dissatisfaction of their partner. Going up the levels of development makes it gradually more easy to be vulnerable, to listen with an open heart to the partner, to express one's view in a caring way. Let's start with the influence of the instincts. The self-preservation instinct is very energy efficient, and this also shows up in their communication. All too often, people with a dominant self-preservation instinct just don't want to spend their energy talking about things. they can often be not very talkative and have the approach of everything is clear in any case. Now, logically, this can have a big negative impact on communication in the relationship. People with a strong sexual instinct are much more assertive in communicating, in standing up for their perspective or to voice their needs, desires, and fantasies. They're more assertive in demanding their partner to speak up. However, being too assertive or too passionate in communication can also be a problem if this is not done with the needed empathy, care, compassion, and understanding for the partner. Finally, people with a strong social instinct may care more than others about communicating and about finding common ground. So they definitely have a certain advantage here, but it doesn't mean that they are necessarily much better at it. Caring about communication does not necessarily mean having better skills in communication. Not surprisingly, most eights are very assertive in their communication about sex and may be very vocal about their needs, desires, and fantasies. And it's definitely positive that one can have an open discussion and a direct discussion with them. But the challenge, however, may be that eights are actually too comfortable, too self-confident, too open, too much focused on their own needs. The lack of care and the lack of subtlety can easily shock or put off a partner. They may believe by being direct they are honest, but openness without care is not honesty, but brutality. Another important issue is that they can speak very easily about the sexual act and orgasms. They call things by their name. But speaking about the vulnerability of sex, about their own experiences, about their emotions, about their own challenges, can be extremely difficult. Nines definitely find it much more difficult to communicate about sex. Many of them actually feel as if sex in itself is communicating, as if sex is a language that allows for telling much more than words. Sex as a form of nonverbal communication is their preferred way to give and receive or to express a deeper intimacy. So, why speak about it if sex in itself already is communication that makes a partner understand how they feel and care about the other? After all, sex is easier than pinpointing with words what they want to communicate. Some remarks need to be made here. There may indeed be some advantages to non-verbal communication. And the 9, being a body type, may indeed be able to use hugging, cuddling, and sex as a way to express things that are difficult to capture by words. But believing that sex is therefore a more accurate language of communication than using words is probably a bit simplistic. As a matter of fact, each of the partners can easily interpret things their own way. Plus, sex is not a good way to communicate about challenges. And after all, 9s may often have sex in order to avoid communicating. Another thing is that the 9 may have naive views that the other should just feel what I want, or that talking about such things may take the bliss away. Thus, it's most likely that the partner or the spouse of the 9 may not even be aware of the sexual desires of the 9. And it is often tormenting and frustrating for the partner to pull the thoughts out of the mouth of the 9, who may think his own wishes are not important, or who may fear the partner will break the relationship if he or she found out about the desires and fantasies of the 9. So indeed, very often, the 9 may not be saying very much. They can easily withdraw into themselves, into their inner sanctum. Very often they're just interacting with themselves in their head and believe they are communicating with their partner, but in reality they're not. So, contrary to 8s, 9s may actually lack this directness and this honesty. Nines may easily downplay their own dissatisfaction and act as if there are no differences in opinion or desire. They may pretend everything is fine in order just to keep the relationship smooth and not to upset the partner. But deep inside, they resent. They may not speak up if they don't like something. They may focus on something irrelevant, beat around the bush, avoid eye contact, be long winded. So instead of being honest, they may not be to the point or even just lie. This will logically add to the frustration of the partner. So the very peaceful approach of the nine may, on the contrary, provoke just more anger and resentment. And of course, we shouldn't forget that quite often nines don't know themselves what they really want. So that definitely doesn't help in expressing their position. Type 1 may feel either very comfortable or not comfortable at all communicating on sex, depending on their values. If they believe it is right to talk about this with the partner, they will. If they believe it is not appropriate, they will have big challenges and may even obstruct any effort that comes from the partner. Yet, communicating about sex may be very difficult when it touches themselves, as they may not want to admit their imperfections. They don't want to hear any feedback, as this is perceived as if they are doing something wrong. As a result, ones tend to be defensive and may easily get resentful and angry. They may feel more comfortable if the communication is focused on giving feedback to the partner. So it can be very difficult to have a discussion among equals, and if there is not enough empathy, then this talk may not come with enough care for the partner. Twos also tend to believe that the partner should just know what they want. If they don't understand without speaking, they perceive as if there must be something wrong in the relationship, as there is no connection on the emotional or spiritual level. So as a result, twos may live under the impression that they know what the partner wants or likes. And they may have difficulties accepting that this is not true, because this would mean that they were actually not connected. So twos can think they are listening to their partner, but in reality, they just continue doing what they want themselves. And when the partner doesn't like this, this may lead to an ambiguous reaction. From one side, the two may fear rejection and abandonment, but from the other side may react in an overly assertive and aggressive manner. And this all too often just further contributes to the already existing disagreement or tension. And another major challenge, of course, is that type 2 is often unable to tell the partner what they like, all too often because they don't know what they like. Threes tend to be quite straightforward and assertive. Still, they are unlikely to be too direct or too demanding. Very often, they want to know what they need to do to improve the sexual relationship. But they may not understand that often they just need to slow down and just be in that relationship. In a casual relationship, they may not be communicating too much in order not to come across as needy or demanding. Still, they will say quite directly if there's something they don't like, or if something's not pleasurable or even painful. Yet they're not very likely to talk about things that are deep inside of themselves, because they can be quite afraid of rejection. And they can also fear being told the partner doesn't make them feel good. But with a partner they know well, threes may actually open up and discuss their deepest feelings. Yet this vulnerability can be painful, so they may close down when they do not know what to say. Fours want to be honest, but very often they are just idealizing and overdoing this honesty in an attempt to be authentic. And they feel as if the relationship is bad anyways if they cannot say openly what they feel. So as a result, and similar to type 8, their honesty can be pretty brutal and hurtful because they share everything that is on their mind, including their own trauma. And this can easily put off a partner, which is going to lead to rejection. And this in turn then becomes a new reason for suffering for the 4. So all too often, 4s are actually not truly honest. First of all, they may not say what they really think and feel because they are convinced the partner won't understand them anyways. Secondly, they really fear to be rejected, so they may not talk about what is really an issue in sex or the relationship. They'll talk about something else. Thirdly, some may feel ashamed talking about sex. And others have no shame talking about things that are considered shameful, so they may actually be comfortable talking about sex. It's authentic to talk about what is shameful. And finally, 4s may enjoy staying in the longing much more than openly talking about desires or fantasies. The moment things become a reality, they can no longer long and the intense feelings subside. So as a result, they may easily withhold information from the partner and retreat into their fantasies. Still, when 4s do communicate, they are quite open to admit issues with sex or sexuality, but they are more likely to talk about relationships problems and not about sex. Some 5s, but definitely not all, like to do a debriefing after sex. The post-sex analysis may be more intimate and appealing to them than just cuddling or hugging. And whereas some people want to process the sexual experience emotionally, 5s want to process it intellectually. And as I said before, a joint analysis with a partner is actually really intimate for them because opening up and discussing this requires a huge amount of trust for them. It's their way of building an emotional connection. So the intimacy is not built only by the sexual act, but also by communicating and jointly analyzing it. Some 5s may even prefer to do this post-sex analysis in writing because it's easier to put some consistency and coherence in this complex mix of thoughts and emotions. Plus, as it's not face-to-face, it's less direct and makes it emotionally easier for them. Now, 5s are very private in general, and they will most often not disclose much with other people. But if the 5 feels confident, he or she may actually be very talkative towards a partner. This is most often the case in a stable relationship, where the 5 feels that an open discussion will happen in a respectful way and the partner won't take advantage of the vulnerability. Still, they may be okay with talking about the sexual experience in a technical manner, but communicating about feelings or emotions may be much harder. So they may be very careful with what they share and not say everything that's on their mind. And if they see the partner rejects them, they will close off completely and never open up again. However, definitely not all 5s are communicating so easily about their sexual relationship. Many keep their thoughts private and do not communicate from the heart. And apart from "that was good" or "I enjoyed it," they may not say much and they may not be willing to discuss their sexual relationship. 5s may also have lots of fantasies, as we already said before, but they may not share them with the partner. So it can be difficult for the partner of such a 5 to know what the 5 really likes, and this can be pretty frustrating or demotivating. On top of that, in casual relationships, the 5 may not care too much about spending energy to talk about sex. Or they may feel anxious about just because of the vulnerability. And of course, on the other side, they may feel more at ease to talk about fetishes with casual sex partners. Many sixes think a lot and communicate little, or they say a lot, but they don't say what they really think or mean. All too often, they're not really honest in their communication about sex or their relationship out of their fear of rejection and abandonment. They often don't have the courage to ask for what they want. But on top of that, they may have so many things in their head that it's actually difficult to put their thoughts together in a coherent manner. Of course, counterphobic sixes, so maybe mainly the sexual six, may be much more assertive and end up saying things they probably shouldn't. A common strategy for sixes to communicate about sex is by intellectualizing sex as a topic. By reading books and speaking to others, they gain a certain knowledge about sex in general. And on that basis, they can engage in an objective discussion about the topic without going too much into the personal details. So, for example, a six would be interested in consensual non monogamy and would start a discussion about this like, hey, did you know that 95% of men and 87% of women have fantasized about sex with multiple partners? And then, based on the reaction of the partner, they can gradually put in more and more of their personal thoughts and feelings, but making sure there's always a chance for this plausible deniability. They never want to end up in a situation where the partner rejects their desires. And another advantage of this intellectualization is that they do not need to cope with the intensity of emotions. Sixes are looking for a pragmatic solution and emotions don't help them. And of course, also here, the sexual six may be much more straightforward than the other sixes. So, finally, type 7. Sevens are very happy to communicate about sex or the sexual relationship as long as it's all light and positive. As a matter of fact, they want to talk about it. And if that's not possible, they will most likely not feel at ease in the relationship. However, when the objective of the communication is to talk about differences or dissatisfactions, it becomes much more challenging. They just don't want to talk about it.